7 Japanese A6M0 circle, like sharks above the Philippine Sea. A lone F6F Hellcat, fresh paint still gleaming, caught at 8,000 feet with nowhere to run. The rookie pilot does something no instructor ever taught. He pulls the stick into his lap, points the nose straight up, and holds it there as the airspeed bleeds to zero. The engine shudders. The aircraft hangs motionless in midair, defying gravity, defying logic. The Zeros overshoot, confused, their perfect intercept geometry shattered in an instant. What happened in those 4 seconds would be analyzed in fighter schools for 60 years. Philippine Sea, June 1944. The sky above the carrier task force is not clean. It smells of salt spray and aviation fuel mixed with gun oil and sweat. The heat inside an F6F Hellcat cockpit at combat power turns the metal frame into a furnace. Temperatures climb past 110 degrees. Radio chatter crackles with position calls and fuel warnings, voices tight with adrenaline and fear. Below, the Pacific stretches endless and blue, swallowing wreckage without ceremony or witness. This is Task Force 58, operating under Admiral Mark Mitcher. They fly combat air patrol over the fleet with margins measured in minutes and gallons. If your fuel runs dry, you ditch. If you ditch far from the destroyers, you disappear. The ocean does not negotiate. The Japanese control scattered island air bases throughout the Marianas, and their Zero fighters are lighter, more agile, and flown by pilots with years of combat experience. Some have 500 hours over China, some have fought since Pearl Harbor. American Hellcat pilots are arriving weekly, fresh from stateside training programs. 18 weeks from civilian to combat. They learn formation flying, gunnery, carrier landings. They do not learn how to survive when outnumbered 7-1. Some last 10 missions, some last 2. The math is brutal and efficient. Every sortie costs fuel, ammunition, nerves. Replacement pilots arrive on escort carriers, wide-eyed and confident. 3 weeks later, half are gone. The statistics are classified but well known. Fighter losses in the Philippine Sea operations exceed 12% per major engagement. Entire squadrons rotate through replacement pilots every 6 weeks. Ground crews stop learning names. They service aircraft, not people. Mechanics develop rituals, small prayers muttered over engine cowlings, cigarettes left burning on wing roots for luck. Into this cauldron steps a pilot named Emmett Clarke. He does not look like a killer. Slight build, wire-rimmed glasses, mechanical engineering degree from Purdue. He speaks in equations and tolerances. His squadron mates call him the calculator behind his back. Some call him the professor. He has flown 14 combat missions without firing his guns. He is methodical, cautious, cerebral. Everything a fighter pilot is not supposed to be. But on June 15, 1944, Clarke will do something that rewrites the manual. He will prove that physics can defeat experience, that calculation can outmaneuver instinct, and that sometimes the smartest move is to stop moving entirely. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Emmett Clarke does not look like a fighter pilot. Slight build, narrow shoulders, wire-rimmed glasses, he removes only to fly. A graduate of Purdue University with a degree in mechanical engineering. He speaks in careful, measured sentences, as if every word has been stress-tested for structural integrity. His squadron mates call him the calculator behind his back. Some call him the professor. A few just call him odd. Clarke reads obsessively. While others play poker or write letters home, he sits in the ready room with technical manuals, performance charts, and translated Japanese tactical reports. He sketches force diagrams in the margins. He fills notebooks with calculations, stall speeds at various weights, climb rates at different power settings, turning radius equations. He asks questions that irritate his flight. Leader. Questions like, why do we always try to outrun them? What if we stopped moving entirely? He does not fit the archetype. Fighter pilots are supposed to be aggressive, instinctive, cocky, men who trust their gut, who react without thinking, who kill without hesitation. Clark is none of these. He calculates, he hesitates, he triple checks. This makes him suspect in the eyes of the squadron, not dangerous to the enemy, but to himself and potentially to others. They keep him on simple assignments: combat air patrol over the fleet, routine intercepts, escort missions with overwhelming numerical advantage. He flies wingman for experienced pilots, fills in when others are grounded for maintenance or illness, and racks up hours without ever commanding a flight. It is a quiet form of exile. The war is full of competent men too cerebral to trust with life or death decisions. Then something shifts. Clark starts volunteering for the missions others avoid. Early morning patrols when the air is rough and visibility is poor. Long-range sweeps with minimal fuel reserves where one navigation error means death. Solo reconnaissance flights where the only backup is the ocean and a life raft. He flies them all with the same methodical precision, returning with detailed reports and undamaged aircraft. His ground crew notices wear patterns on his aircraft that suggest aggressive maneuvering during these solo flights. Hard pulls that stress the airframe, sustained climbs at full power, rapid throttle changes that indicate combat maneuvering practice. The crew chief asks if everything is functioning correctly. Clark says he is testing performance limits. The crew chief does not ask again. Clark's logbook shows something unusual. While most pilots fly 2 to 3 hours per mission, Clark averages 2.8 hours. He pushes his fuel to the absolute limit, landing with tanks nearly empty. He is learning his aircraft's capabilities with scientific precision, how long it can sustain full power, how high it can climb before performance degrades, how slow it can fly before control authority disappears. He is preparing for something. The other pilots do not notice. The squadron leader does not notice. But Clark knows. He is running experiments, collecting data, testing a hypothesis that doctrine says is impossible. He is waiting for the moment when theory becomes survival. Emmett Clark was born in 1921 in Lafayette, Indiana. His father was a factory foreman at the Alcoa aluminum plant. His mother was a school teacher who taught mathematics at Jefferson High School. The house smelled of machine oil and chalk dust. Dinner conversation revolved around engineering problems, structural loads, material tolerances, and precision. Clark learned early that accuracy mattered more than force, that understanding systems was more valuable than brute strength. He attended Purdue University, studied mechanical engineering, spent weekends in the library sketching aircraft designs, instead of attending football games or fraternity parties. He was fascinated by aerodynamics, by the relationship between lift and drag, by how wing loading affected stall characteristics. Professors described him as methodical and thorough. Classmates described him as invisible. He had no close friends, no girlfriend, no social life beyond the engineering lab. He graduated in May 1942 with honors and no clear direction. The world was at war. America needed pilots, engineers, factory workers. Clark tried to enlist in the Army Air Forces. He passed the initial screening, entered aviation cadet training at Maxwell Field in Alabama. The training was compressed, accelerated by wartime necessity. 18 weeks from civilian to combat pilot. Clark passed flight training. Not at the top of his class, not at the bottom. Instructors noted his technical aptitude, but questioned his killer instinct. One evaluation called him overly analytical under simulated stress. Another flagged him for hesitation in aggressive maneuvers. A third noted excellent technical knowledge but lacks combat mindset. He was assigned to fighters, then reassigned to transition training, then reassigned again to operational training. Some pilots wore their reassignments like badges of failure, evidence that the system had rejected them. Clark treated each one like field research. He studied how different instructors taught energy management. He noted what worked and what got trainees killed. He kept notebooks filled with performance data from different aircraft types, comparing stall speeds, roll rates, dive limitations. His instructors noticed something unusual. Clark never panicked. Even when his engine quit during a training flight over the Alabama countryside, even when his landing gear jammed and he had to belly land on a grass strip, he would narrate the problem aloud, clinically, like a surgeon calling out instruments during an operation. Oil pressure 0, altitude loss 150 ft/minute, best glide speed 110 knots, selecting emergency landing site. It unnerved some instructors, it reassured others. There was no hysteria in his voice, just data and process. Clark also noticed patterns that others missed, how stalls behaved differently at different power settings, how vertical climbs affected pursuit geometry, how an aircraft at 0 airspeed became unpredictable, impossible to track with conventional gunnery. He began sketching a maneuver in his notebook, refining it across months of thought and observation. The problem facing Navy fighter pilots in 1944 was not courage or skill. It was mathematics and physics. Japanese A6M-0s dominated turning engagements through superior power-to-weight ratio and lower wing loading. The 0 was lighter by 2,000 pounds, more maneuverable at slow speeds, and could outclimb early American fighters below 10,000 feet. Navy doctrine relied on the THAC weave for mutual support and boom and zoom tactics for attack, dive on the foe. Enemy using superior speed, fire, extend away using superior weight and engine power. Simple in theory, deadly in execution, except when you were outnumbered and caught at low altitude with no energy advantage. Zero's coordinated attacks with brutal efficiency learned over 3 years of combat operations. They exploited vertical space, climbed faster than expected at combat weights, and forced American pilots into slow-speed dogfights, where the Zero's agility became absolutely lethal. Navy gunners could not track them in tight, sustained turns. The deflection angles changed too rapidly. Fighter escorts were stretched thin across hundreds of miles of ocean. Hellcat pilots were often on their own, fighting alone against multiple opponents. Intelligence officers studied after-action reports and found a grim pattern repeating across every theater. When Hellcats encountered Zeros at low altitude and slow speed, survival depended on 2 things: teamwork and energy management. Maneuvering in the horizontal plane rarely helped. Hellcats were heavier, less agile in sustained turns. Turning fights were suicide against a competent Zero pilot. So the doctrine became: maintain speed, stay fast, use your weight and power advantage to dictate engagement terms. Do not deviate from this formula. But pilots kept dying at unacceptable rates. Commanders tried variations on the basic doctrine. They added more aircraft to patrols, flying 6-plane divisions instead of 4-plane divisions. They altered intercept altitudes, attempting to maintain energy advantage. They scheduled sorties to maximize fuel and ammunition availability. Nothing changed the fundamental equation that governed every engagement. A Zero could outturn a Hellcat in horizontal maneuvering. Period. Physics did not negotiate. Some pilots tried desperate evasive tactics learned from combat or invented in moments of terror. Rolling scissors, split-S maneuvers, vertical reversals, defensive spirals. Most stalled out or collided with the water. A few survived through luck and were quietly counseled to stick to approved doctrine. The message was clear and unambiguous. Do not experiment. Follow procedure. Accept the losses as the cost of winning the war. Clark read the reports differently. He noticed that the worst casualties occurred when Hellcats tried to turn with Zeros in horizontal engagements. The enemy would stay inside the turn radius, sit on the tail, and fire until something critical exploded or the pilot died. Every manual said the same thing: maintain speed, extend using superior power, do not slow down under any circumstances. Clark saw a fundamental flaw in that logic. If you cannot outturn them and you cannot outrun them at low speed, what is left? Clark started thinking about energy in 3 dimensions, not just the horizontal plane, where doctrine focused all its attention. A zero expects horizontal or climbing flight. It tracks targets that move predictably through space along conventional flight paths. But if an aircraft suddenly moves vertically and stops, the zero's tracking solution collapses. The pursuit curve breaks. The geometry fails. Not forever. Maybe 3 or 4 seconds. But in combat, 3 seconds is an eternity. Clark sketched it obsessively in his notebook during ready room downtime. If you pulled vertical at maximum power, the Hellcat's weight and engine thrust would carry it upward for several seconds. As airspeed bled off, the aircraft would decelerate rapidly. At zero airspeed, it would hang motionless, engine roaring, propeller clawing at thin air with no forward velocity. Then it would fall, nose dropping, accelerating downward under gravity's pull. The maneuver was textbook aerobatics. Hammerhead stall, also called a stall turn or a hammerhead turn. Pilots practiced it in training as a demonstration of aircraft control, but no one used it in combat. No one even considered it. The reasons were obvious to everyone except Clark. Slowing to zero. Airspeed made you vulnerable. A stalled aircraft cannot maneuver. It falls. It becomes a stationary target hanging in the sky. Worse, the Hellcat was heavy, 12,000 pounds, fully loaded. Recovering from a vertical stall required altitude, skill, and perfect timing. Too slow to recover, and you entered an uncontrollable spin that required thousands of feet to stop. Too fast and you overstressed the airframe, potentially causing structural failure. The margin for error was non-existent. Clark pitched the idea during a ready room discussion about defensive tactics. The response was immediate and dismissive. Stalling in combat was suicidal. It violated every principle of energy management taught since World War I. The aircraft would be a sitting duck. Multiple pilots said so. The flight leader ended the discussion. Clark did not argue. He stopped talking about it publicly, but he did not stop thinking privately. He ran calculations in his notebook during night watches. At full power, the F-6F Hellcat could sustain a vertical climb for approximately 8 to 10 seconds before airspeed dropped below 50 knots. During that time, it would rise roughly 800 to 1,000 feet, depending on entry speed and weight. A zero attacking from behind would need to adjust its flight path rapidly from horizontal pursuit to vertical pursuit. The closure rate would shift from horizontal to vertical. The zero's lighter weight meant it could follow initially, but its lower power-to-weight ratio meant it would decelerate faster than the heavier Hellcat under full power. If Clark timed the stall perfectly, the zero would overshoot. Not by much, maybe 200 or 300 yards, but that was enough. Enough to reverse the geometry, enough to turn the hunted into the hunter, enough to survive when doctrine offered no answer. Clark knew the risks. If he misjudged the entry speed, he would stall before reaching sufficient altitude. If he pulled too hard, he would overstress the airframe and cause structural damage or failure. If he hesitated during the recovery, he would enter a spin and die before he could recover. It was insane by every conventional measure. It was also physics. And Clark trusted physics more than he trusted doctrine written by men who had never faced 7 zeros alone. June 15, 1944. Dawn comes slow over the carrier deck of USS Lexington. The ocean is flat and gray, stretching to every horizon. Flight deck crews move in practiced silence, spotting aircraft in launch sequence, checking fuel lines for leaks, loading ammunition belts into wing guns. Clark's Hellcat sits third in line, canopy open, engine cold, waiting. The mission brief is short and routine. Launch at 0530 hours, climb to 15,000 feet. Establish combat air patrol over the task force. Engage any enemy aircraft on threat axis. Return on bingo fuel. Expected enemy activity moderate based on intelligence reports. Nothing unusual, nothing special. Clark walks the pre-flight inspection personally, as he always does. He checks control surfaces for freedom of movement, inspects the propeller for nicks or damage, tests the stick for full deflection in all axes. He reviews fuel calculations with his plane captain, a 19-year-old kid from Ohio. 180 gallons internal, enough for 2.5 hours at patrol power settings. He briefs himself in his usual internal monologue, reviewing performance numbers. Climb rate 2,800 feet per minute at combat power. Service ceiling 37,000 pound-foot. Stall speed clean configuration 84 knots. Recovery from vertical stall requires minimum 2,000 feet at altitude above terrain or water. They launch at 0530 hours. The catapult shot presses Clark into his seat with 3 Gs of acceleration. The Hellcat clears the deck, gear retracting, flaps coming up, airspeed building. He joins the formation, 4 aircraft in loose fingertip spacing. They climb through scattered clouds, leveling at 15,000 pound-feet. The radio is quiet. The ocean below is a featureless mirror reflecting morning sun. Nothing moves. Nothing threatens. By 630 hours, fuel is down to 140 gallons. Clark's flight leader calls bingo fuel in 20 minutes. Then the radio crackles with the voice of the Combat Information Center controller. Bogies inbound, low altitude, 20 miles northwest, estimated 6 to 8 aircraft. Clark's heart rate does not change. He has been waiting for this moment for months. The flight leader orders descent. They drop through 10,000 feet, aerospeed building past 300 knots. Clark scans the horizon, searching for the telltale dots. Nothing yet. Then he sees them. Small dots against the water, climbing slowly. 7 aircraft in loose formation. The silhouette is unmistakable, even at 10 miles distance. A6M Zeros. The flight leader calls the bounce, directing the attack. Clark acknowledges, his hands steady on the stick and throttle, his mind already running calculations. The Hellcats dive, airspeed passing 350 knots. The Zeros see them and split, executing the standard defense. 4, brake left, 3 brake right, forcing the attackers to divide their attention. Clark's flight leader follows the 4. Clark and his wingman follow the 3, diving hard, closing the distance. The geometry collapses fast. The Zeros reverse, climbing back toward the Hellcats in a Chandelle maneuver. Clark's wingman fires a long burst and misses. The Zeros scatter again, using their superior maneuverability. Clark tracks 1, but it dives away toward the water. He does not follow. Fuel is critical. Chasing them down to the deck would burn fuel he needs to get home. Then his wingman's voice crackles over the radio, tight with fear. "Clark, you've got 3 on your 6, closing fast." Clark looks back over his shoulder. 3 Zeros, stacked in vertical trail formation, diving toward him from 10,000 feet. His wingman is too far to help, engaged with his own target. Clark is alone at 8,000 feet altitude, 200 knots airspeed, no energy advantage. The Zeros are closing at 400 knots combined closure rate. He has perhaps 5 seconds before they open fire. This is the moment he has been preparing for. He pulls the throttle to full power and hauls the stick into his lap. The Hellcat's nose pitches vertical. The horizon disappears below. The sky fills Clark's windscreen, pure blue stretching upward. The engine roars at full power, 2,000 horsepower clawing at gravity. The airspeed bleeds off rapidly. 200 knots, 180, 160. Clark holds the stick neutral, full back pressure, rudder centered to prevent yaw. The aircraft climbs, but the rate of climb decreases every second as energy converts to altitude. 150 knots, 130. The altimeter spins upward, 8,500 feet, 9,000 feet. Behind him, the Zeros react with confusion and hesitation. The lead Zero pulls vertical to follow, committing to the pursuit. The other two hesitate, breaking off to the sides, unwilling to commit to such an unorthodox maneuver. The lead Zero climbs, engine screaming, but its lighter weight works against it now. The climb rate is initially high, but deceleration is faster than the heavier Hellcat. Clark watches the airspeed indicator, 110 knots, 100. The Hellcat shudders. The controls go soft, less responsive. 90 knots, 80. The stall warning buffet starts, vibration running through the stick into his hand. Clark does not flinch. He holds the climb, trusting his calculations. 70 knots. 60. The Zero is 500 yards behind, climbing vertical, but slowing faster despite its lighter weight. Its nose is high, engine screaming, but it cannot maintain the energy state. 50 knots. Clark's altimeter reads 9,800 feet. The Hellcat hangs in the air, engine thundering at maximum power, propeller churning, but the aircraft is barely moving forward. 40 knots. 30. The Zero pilot realizes the trap too late. He tries to roll out, to dive away and escape, but he has no energy remaining. His airspeed is too low for effective control. He wallows, nose dropping, falling into a stall of his own. 20 knots. Clark's Hellcat reaches zero airspeed. For one impossible second, the aircraft hangs motionless in the sky, perfectly vertical, engine roaring at full power, defying every law of flight. Then physics reasserts itself. The nose drops. The Hellcat falls backward, tail first, engine torque rolling it inverted as gravity takes control. Clark has done this maneuver in training dozens of times at safe altitudes. He knows the recovery sequence by heart. Stick forward, full rudder opposite the roll, let the nose drop through the horizon, recover in a dive. But he is inverted now, falling backward, and the Zero is 200 yards ahead of him, also stalled, also falling, tumbling out of control. Clark shoves the stick forward. The nose drops through the horizon. The Hellcat accelerates downward, inverted, building speed rapidly. 50 knots, 80, 110. Clark rolls upright, pulls the stick back smoothly, levels at 8,500 feet. His airspeed is 140 knots and building. He is alive. He has energy. He has position. He looks up. The Zero is above him, spinning, the pilot fighting desperately for control. The other two Zeros are a mile away, circling, watching, uncertain what just happened. Clark pulls into a climbing turn, throttle still at full power, tracking the spinning Zero. The Japanese pilot recovers at 7,000 feet, rolls wings level, but he is slow, disoriented, trying to regain situational awareness. Clark has position, altitude, and speed advantage, all three elements of the energy equation. He closes to 300 yards, pulling lead to account for deflection. The Zero tries to turn, sensing the threat, but he lacks energy for a hard brake. Clark leads the turn, squeezes the trigger, fires a 2-second burst. 6 .50 caliber machine guns converge. Tracers walk across space. The Zero's engine explodes in a shower of metal and fire. Smoke pours from the cowling. The aircraft rolls inverted and dives into the ocean, trailing black smoke. Clark does not watch it hit the water. He reverses hard, scanning for threats, breathing. Hard now. The other two Zeros are climbing toward him cautiously, but they are wary. They saw what happened. They do not understand it, but they witnessed it. They saw their lead pilot fall into a trap that should not exist. Clark has altitude advantage now, 9,000 feet, airspeed 220 knots. The Zeros are at 7,000 feet, climbing slowly. Clark dives, building speed, 2 at 80 knots, 320. The Zeros split again, executing the standard defense. One breaks left, one breaks right. Divide the attacker's attention, force him to choose, punish the choice. Clark ignores the one on the left. He tracks the one on the right, closes to 400 yards, pulls lead, fires a burst, misses. The tracers pass behind. The Zero brakes hard, turning inside Clark's radius easily, exploiting his superior maneuverability. Clark does not try to follow the turn. He pulls vertical again, full power, stick back. The Hellcat climbs, airspeed bleeding. 250 knots, 220, 180. The Zero tries to follow, pulling vertical in pursuit, but Clark is already 500 feet above him, still climbing on momentum and power. Clark watches the airspeed, 140, 120, 100. The Zero is below, climbing, but slowing faster. Clark holds the climb, 80 knots, 60. The Zero stalls first. Its nose drops. The pilot tries to recover, rolling inverted, diving away. Clark's Hellcat reaches zero airspeed again, hangs suspended for 1 heartbeat, then falls. Clark recovers, rolling upright, diving, building speed. He is 300 yards behind the Zero now, perfect firing position. He fires, hits. The Zero's tail section disintegrates. The aircraft tumbles, uncontrollable, and falls toward the ocean. 2 down. Clark scans the sky. The third Zero is gone, diving away toward the northwest, running for home. Clark checks his fuel gauge, 80 gallons remaining. He is bingo fuel, possibly past bingo. He turns southeast toward the task force, throttling back to conserve what remains. His hands are shaking now, adrenaline fading, leaving exhaustion. His radio crackles, his flight leader calling. "Clark, where are you?" Clark responds, voice steady. "Heading home. Fuel critical. Did you engage?" "Confirmed 2 kills. Silence on the radio for several seconds. Then, "Say again?" "2 kills. Vertical stall maneuver." Another long silence. "Understood. See you on deck." Clark climbs to 5,000 feet, throttles back to maximum endurance power setting. The ocean passes below, endless and indifferent. He runs through the engagement in his mind, analyzing every detail. Entry speed, climb angle, stall timing, recovery altitude, weapons employment. He mentally catalogs every variable, every decision point. Repeatable. The maneuver is repeatable with proper execution. The carrier appears on the horizon 30 minutes later. Clark enters the landing pattern, drops his tailhook, calls the ball, traps on the first pass. He taxis forward, shuts down the engine. The silence is deafening after hours of engine roar. He sits in the cockpit, breathing, hands still shaking slightly, until the plane captain climbs up and opens the canopy. "You okay, sir?" Clark nods. He climbs out, legs unsteady on the wing. The deck crew is staring. His wingman is already on deck, walking toward him rapidly. The flight leader is waiting at the island superstructure. Clark walks toward the debrief, knowing that what he just did will either change everything or get him grounded permanently. The line between innovation and recklessness is measured in results. He has the results. 2 kills, 0 damage to his aircraft, successful recovery to the carrier. The physics worked exactly as calculated. The debrief happens in the squadron ready room 20 minutes later. Clark sits across from his flight leader and the squadron commander. An intelligence officer takes notes. The flight leader speaks first. "Describe the engagement." Clark describes it methodically, without emotion or embellishment. 7 Zeros, separated from the flight, 3 on his tail at 8,000 feet. Executed vertical stall maneuver, forced overshoot, recovered with altitude and energy advantage, engaged and destroyed 2 aircraft. 3rd escaped. The squadron commander interrupts. "You stalled in combat?" "Affirmative. Controlled vertical stall." "That is not doctrine." "No, sir, it is physics." The room is silent. The intelligence officer looks up from his notepad. "Did it work?" "Confirmed 2 kills. 0 damage to my aircraft." The squadron commander leans back in his chair, studying Clark. "If you had failed, you would be dead." "Yes, sir. And if you had spun in, I would have 1 less pilot and 1 less aircraft." "Yes, sir." "But you did not." "No, sir." The commander looks at the flight leader. "What do you think?" The flight leader hesitates. "I saw the wreckage. 2 Zeros in the water, confirmed by destroyer Pickett. Clark's aircraft has no damage. Whatever he did, it worked. The commander turns back to Clark. Can you do it again? With sufficient altitude and airspeed, yes, sir. How much altitude? Minimum 2,000 feet above terrain or water, preferably 5,000 feet for safety margin. And the risk? High. Timing is critical. Entry speed must be between 180 and 220 knots. Recovery requires precise control inputs. Margin for error is minimal. The commander considers this for a long moment. I am not going to order anyone to try this, but I am not going to forbid it either. If other pilots want to learn, you will teach them. Controlled conditions. Over water. Minimum 10,000 feet altitude. Clark nods. Understood, sir. 3 days later, Clark briefs the maneuver to the squadron in the ready room. Half the pilots are skeptical. One calls it suicide with extra steps. Another says it violates every principle of energy management. But a few are curious, intrigued by the physics. Clark takes them up one at a time, demonstrates the maneuver at safe altitude, shows them the entry, the hold, the recovery, explains the physics of energy states and pursuit geometry. Most try it once and decide it is too risky for combat application. 2 pilots practice it repeatedly until they can execute it reliably. Within a week, one of them uses it in combat. A single zero on his tail at low altitude, no escape using conventional tactics. He pulls vertical, stalls. The zero overshoots exactly as Clark predicted. He recovers, engages, kills. The pilot lands shaking and tells everyone who will listen. Word spreads through the carrier air group like wildfire. Clark's maneuver is analyzed, debated, tested by other pilots. Some dismiss it as a desperation move, last resort only. Others see the tactical logic, the geometric elegance. A few incorporate it into their repertoire, not as primary doctrine, but as a final option when speed and altitude are gone. By July 1944, Navy intelligence reports note unusual evasive tactics being used by Hellcat pilots in combat. Japanese after-action reports mention American fighters that climb vertical and stop defying pursuit.